Hello, my name is Alexis and I have chosen to discuss the poem Midterm Break by Seamus Heaney. So first we'll start off with a summary. Midterm Break is about an actual event that happened in Seamus Heaney's life. The poem starts out with a young man waiting for his neighbors to pick him up from the college sickbay. Once he gets home, he finds his father, mother, and many others grieving there. An ambulance comes and brings in a body. The body is of a person who got hit by a car, and in the last line we find out that the body was of a boy and he was only 4 years old. Now we'll move on to the layout of the poem, which is the stanzas, rhyme, all that jazz. So, Midterm Break is made up of 8 stanzas. The poem starts out with 7 stanzas of 3 lines each, with the 8th and final stanza being only 1 line. The first 7 stanzas being consistently the same sets up a pattern for the reader. Even though the lines don't rhyme, the reader gets familiarized with the poem, and then the final stanza comes, which consists of only the 1 line. This final stanza is where we find out that the person who died is a 4-year-old boy, which is very shocking in itself, and the 1 line that stands alone to tell us this adds to that shock. Heaney very deliberately did this to show the shock and sadness of this young boy's death. As for the rhyme scheme, the poem almost doesn't have any. There is no rhyming at all until the last 2 lines of the poem. In these lines, Heaney rhymes clear and year, which is important because Heaney was trying to emphasize these final lines. As I mentioned earlier, the last line is where the reader finds out that the boy was only 4 years old, and by rhyming these 2 lines, Heaney is putting extra emphasis on the fact that the boy was so young, that the boy was too young to die. So now we'll move on to the elements. The first element I chose is setting. So, the title of this poem, Midterm Break, makes the reader think that the poem will be happy and fun, because midterm break is usually when people are relaxed, they take vacations, it's something to look forward to. But within the first stanza, the reader realizes that this poem is not going to be happy. The first 2 sentences say that the narrator is in a college sickbay and counting bells that are knelling classes to a close. Knelling is usually a word associated with funeral bells, so this quickly puts a somber tone in the poem. Then comes the next setting, which is the narrator's house, where he sees his father weeping openly on the porch. People are telling him they are sorry, and his mother is so cried out that she can only cough angry tears that aren't even actual tears. The reader then comes to the final setting, which is the room where the corpse is in. The narrator looks at his brother, who he hasn't seen in 6 weeks, and notices that he is paler than before, and the only scar from the accident is a poppy bruise on his forehead. The final scene we are left with is a young boy in a 4-foot-long coffin, which, quote, a foot for every year, end quote. The second element I chose is theme. The main theme of this poem is, quite obvious, death, but there are also underlying themes that we can get from it, such as love and living. The first theme, death, is something that everyone will have to deal with at some point in their lifetime. Heaney is writing this poem as a kind of way to deal with his brother's death. Throughout the poem, there is no emotion showed by the narrator except when he says that he is embarrassed by the old man who is shaking his hand. This is the only emotion the reader knows for sure the narrator feels. One reason the author may have included only the emotion embarrassment was because the narrator was so shocked by the fact that his little brother was actually dead that embarrassment was the easiest thing for him to feel at that time. The other themes, love and living, are themes that you have to pick out of the cracks. The poem emphasizes love and that you never know when a tragedy will strike. The reader can also take from the poem that life is short and should be lived to the fullest. The reader can take from this poem that they should always show love to their loved ones and cherish the time they have on this earth, because we never know when the other people's time, or even our own time, is going to be up.